Hello, my name is Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL Graduates. Welcome back to another video where today we're going to be going into our Game Week 10 team reveals. Let's get straight into it, and one of us is on our wildcard.
Okay, so we're going to kick things off with my team. I am not on my wildcard this week. Spoiler alert. It is definitely Ben on his wildcard. So you'll be able to see his wildcard draft after my team. But we're going to run through my team. I've got one free transfer to use and a couple of problems, as you can see on screen, to put out at the moment. So Areola in goal, Everton at home. I think it's a good fixture for West Ham. Clean sheetable, yes, but Everton have looked relatively dangerous so far this season, just not being able to find the back of the net. So I'm hoping West Ham can keep them out for that. Moving on into defence, Cash is the only one without a problem at the moment. He's got Luton at home this week, which is a really good fixture. I think a lot of FPL managers may be overlooking the fact that Villa have this really, really good run. I know a lot of managers own Ollie Watkins, but I think investing in the rest of their squad is equally as important. And then we've got Destiny Adoji, who obviously came off at the 55th minute against Fulham on Monday night. That was really frustrating because he didn't get that clean sheet. And it was basically a precautionary substitution just because they have the game on Friday. They're playing with a 3-day break in between. So we didn't want to risk him too much. Anja said today that basically he's going to be assessed tomorrow and they'll make a decision tomorrow, which is really not helpful. But hopefully we should have some early team news, so I'll be able to understand whether Adoji is going to start or not. And then obviously the other player is Sven Botman. Obviously we had our hopes sort of ruined last week, hoping that he'd be back after the international break. He hasn't even trained with Newcastle. It's going to be another couple of weeks before he returns, so he could be on the chopping block for me this week. The only issue is that I don't have any other Newcastle defender. So at the moment, Trippier is really, really ruining me alongside his attack and returns. What's your thoughts, Ben, on so far? And what would you maybe do with those sort of issues at the moment?
Yeah, it looks like that potentially Botman could be the one to go, and it's been frustrating for owners because obviously he's been in contention one week and the next week he's out for another 2 weeks, and then you had the international break and everything. You think he's going to be back, he's going to be back. It's just adding 2 weeks onto it every single time. So I'd maybe would look to cut your losses there and just transfer someone out, maybe even just go sideways to someone like Dan Burn. But in terms of the rest of the defense, it looks fairly strong. I wouldn't be worried too much about Destiny Adoji there. But other than that, really strong. A couple of decent home fixtures in there as well. I anticipate a few points coming your way this week.
Yeah, and then moving on into midfield, we've got that 5-man midfield at the moment. We'll start with left to right. So obviously Bruno Fernandes at home to Man City. Obviously definitely not the best fixture right now. Bruno Fernandes as well doesn't tend to perform in terms of FPL points in those big games. He struggles to get returns. So he has been on my mind to maybe get out this week. The only thing that's sort of saving him at the moment is United's run after Manchester City. They face Fulham away, Luton away, and Everton at home, or Everton away and Luton at home, one of the two. So a really decent fixture run after that City game. So it's just one of those things because obviously Saka does play Sheffield United this weekend at home. It's an easy sideways move. I can easily do it, but obviously I have the problems in defence. So I have potentially thought about having a hit this week, which I think could pay off, especially with those fixtures in mind. But I'll dive into that a little bit later on. Diaby, Luton at home. He's definitely not covering Ollie Watkins at the moment, which is really frustrating, but he looked good in their fixture at the weekend. So I'm hoping the returns come through with him. Anthony Gordon has looked really, really good, and he has been performing as well. So he got that goal at the weekend, could have probably had 2 as well. Newcastle, the best attacking side in the Premier League at the moment with the underlying data. Wolves away, it's a game where I expect them to score in. Heung-min Son, Palace away. A lot of managers looking to get off Spurs assets, Maddison, Son in particular. For me, I don't think their fixtures are actually that bad when you look at them in detail. If we could try and take a look at them here. Fixtures. So obviously Palace away this week. Obviously, we all know that Crystal Palace have loads of injuries at the moment. And for me, that is a very good fixture to target at the moment. Chelsea at home. Again, it's at home, so I don't mind that fixture too much. Wolves away is, again, a good fixture. Villa at home, again, it's a home fixture, so I don't mind that too much. And then, obviously, the City away game is not ideal. And then it's West Ham at home again. So some okay home fixtures with some good away fixtures. So for me personally, I would not be looking to ship out the Spurs midfielders yet. If you have a double up, I'd maybe consider moving one to Saka if that's what you want to do. But for me, I think one is definitely essential at the moment. And then at the moment, we've got Mo Salah on the captaincy, Nottingham Forest at home, playing really well at the minute. Mo Salah really in form, and obviously at Anfield. For me at the moment, that's a better captaincy shout than Erling Haaland, just because of the form of Manchester City at the moment. I think he will score at the weekend, but I think Mo Salah will outscore him. And that's my current thoughts. I don't think I'll change captaincy right now. I think I'm pretty set on that. What's your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, the captaincy is a decent choice. You can't really complain too much about that. But again, it's the coverage really, Newcastle defence and Arsenal midfield where you're potentially looking at here. And that's the more prominent issue sort of going forward in your team. Other than that, it's pretty decent and pretty similar actually to a lot of wildcarded teams. So you're pretty set in that aspect. It's just the one or two changes there.
Yeah, definitely agree with those points. And then moving up top, we've got that City double up of Haaland and Alvarez. I'm going to the derby as a United fan, so having the City double up is not ideal, really. So, yeah, we'll see how that pans out. Alvarez obviously was rested midweek, so he should probably start at the weekend. And then Haaland as well, bagging a brace, coming back into form just in time for the Manchester derby. Not great news as a United fan, but hey, if my FPL team gets some points, we can't complain. And then moving on to the bench as well, obviously Onana on the bench, Colwill, who could feature depending on Adoji's fitness. I think Botman will definitely come out this week. It's just a question of who. Obviously, Ben mentioned Dan Burn. I've also been looking at the likes of Gabriel, as I feel that Arsenal have better defensive fixtures going forward now. Newcastle's run sort of coming towards the end of it now. They're good runs. So potentially Gabriel there as well. And then obviously Kabore and Mubama make the numbers. In my situation, Ben, what would you do? Would you take a hit this week and sort of go for the points in terms of looking at Saka maybe, or would you just sort of make that defensive switch and hope that Bruno Fernandes gets a return in that Manchester derby?
In my opinion, I'm going to say it's a bit more of a risk to take the hit this week just because it's a week where a lot of managers are wildcarding. I don't think there's actually going to be too many hits flying about because a lot of teams are fairly well set. So it's just a case of probably benching Botman for Colwill and then making your Bruno Fernandes move. I think that's the most sensible one. Or if you're looking to sort of keep faith in Bruno Fernandes for his nice fixtures afterwards and maybe look to move on like Botman on someone else, then I think you can make that move. But to make the more moves and take the hits, I think's a bit more of a risk than sort of the perceived reward that I can see from it this week. Okay, and moving on to my team. As we all know, I'm on a wild card at the moment. So, of course, like with any wild card, this is definitely subject to change. We all know that during the wild card, we make hundreds of changes, and that is no different for myself. So, to start with, we've got Areola in goal. Bringing him in as he's probably one of the sort of best value keepers on the game at the moment. He's producing decent amount of points. And to be honest, I haven't seen too much in terms of standout performances or standout points getters in the goalkeeper department. So I'm going to keep it cheap and simple there. Into defense, Matty Cash, I've kept him in. I initially brought him in a couple of weeks ago. I'm keeping the faith in him. The fixtures are really, really nice. So the same can be said really for Gabriel as well. The cheapest route into the Arsenal defence is a no-brainer really for me with the fixtures and with the tight budget that a wildcard 10 brings compared to maybe like a wildcard 8. I've currently got Trippier in at the moment, and I think this is one that is probably subject to change. Like I brought him in initially because I knew his price was rising, and it has risen. I've got him in. I'm tempted because of the fixture run coming to an end and because I want a different option potentially in midfield. I may have to downgrade Trippier to facilitate this move. And finally, in the defence, we have got Tsimikas. And, well, for Liverpool's fixtures, they are decent. And he is the cheapest route into Liverpool defence. So on some set pieces, on some corners as well. So I've got no issues there with having Tsimikas in my wildcard team. Josh, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, overall, it looks really strong. Like I said, Gabriel is someone who I'd be looking to target right now. Some decent fixtures for Arsenal, defensively especially. Areola, obviously, I've got him this week. Same with Cash. I think both really good assets for the short to medium term. I agree with what you're saying with Trippier. I think the thing is with him is that his attacking returns have been so great, and I just don't know whether he can sustain that for a longer period of time. And that's what's been really setting him apart from Dan Burn and the cheaper assets in that Newcastle defence. So it's just whether you can really afford to be honest, because it's a massive jump from, I think it's like 2.3 million now. I think he's 7 million, Trippier. So that's a huge amount of money to upgrade for the same clean sheet potential. So you're paying 2.3 million just for his attack and return. So for me personally, I would downgrade to Burn, because I just don't think Trippier in the long term is worth that extra 2.3. I think Tsimikas, though, is a fantastic option and someone who I'd strongly consider for my team potentially as one of those defensive replacements, just because how long Robertson's out for and how, Tsimikas, like you mentioned, he's on set pieces and things like this. He's so attacking. I think we could see some double-digit hauls from him in the near future.
Okay, so moving on into the midfield, and two of these players I had initially in my team before Wildcard, and that's Bukayo Saka and Karu Matoma. I really like Saka for his potential on, he plays every minute for Arsenal. He's so important to the team. The fixtures are great, potentially on penalties. I think he's pretty much as nailed on as a locked in for one of my first players in the wildcard team. So I'm really happy to have him. Matoma, again, there's been a few people doubting whether Matoma is worth getting on the wildcard. And I think it's worth investing in at least one Brighton player in the wildcard, because their fixture run is great for the next few fixtures. And Matoma's not really a minutes concern either. So again, I'm really happy to have him in. Salah on the captaincy at the moment. Again, he's been so consistent in his returns that against Nottingham Forest at home, I can see him producing some results. So hopefully we'll see some big returns from Salah this week. And Bowen is potentially the one that could be the make weight in terms of downgrading Trippier and upgrading Bowen to Heung-min Son. I think I'm probably going to make that move at the time of recording. Obviously on a Thursday evening, Son hasn't gone up in price, but he is due to rise. So I'm probably looking at bringing in Heung-min Son and then bringing in a 4.7 million defender on the wild card as probably my final sort of couple of changes there. So Josh, based on the midfield and that potential change in Trippier and Bowen to Son and Burn, what are your initial sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the changes is probably the smart move. I think, like I said, when I spoke about Son in my team, I think the fixtures there are pretty good, to be honest, for Spurs' attack. We've seen how good they are in attack and how, their best form of defense for Spurs at the moment is attacking. So for me, Son or Maddison, at least one of them is a must if you are wildcarding. And like I said, with that Trippier, 2.3 million is so much money compared to someone like Dan Burn for the same clean sheet potential. I think Jarrod Bowen is a really nice differential. And for me, it would be between him and Matoma. If you can afford that sort of jump up, maybe it's worth hopping on Bowen. I agree with what you say about Brighton. Their fixtures are really good, but the problem is the rotation, because of Europa League. There's just going to be so many different players. They've got a few injuries as well now. So yeah, I think it's always going to be tough to predict. I think Matoma is pretty nailed in that, but it's just a case of like if rather than when sort of thing with De Zerbi. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one, but I like the rest of it. I think Saka is a really good pick, and he's probably a little bit less owned now considering he had all those injuries and problems and stuff like that. So it's nice that you can just jump on him straight away.
Okay, and moving on to the strikers and the bench, I've currently got Ollie Watkins and Erling Haaland. I mentioned it previously on TikTok during the week that I do think Ollie Watkins is pretty close to being essential in any wildcard team because his form is great. He's looking really, really sharp and he's producing the stats to go alongside those FPL points he's been picking up recently. So, I mean, he was one of the first names that I brought in. And then Haaland up top as well. Few people sort of backing against Haaland over recent weeks. I'm keeping him in, keeping the faith. I do think, like Josh said, he scores against Manchester United. And then on the bench, Turner, I said I was keeping it cheap, and I am. There's obviously some element of risk with him coming out for, Forest's new keeper, but I don't think that will happen sort of in the next few weeks. Cole Palmer on the bench as well. Chelsea's got some tough fixtures, so I'm debating whether I'm going to keep him or sort of put him onto someone else. But for now, he stays in the team because of that penalty factor for Chelsea. And, they could turn up against anyone on their day. Lascelles is another one that I'm probably going to look to move on in terms of my wild card because 3.9 million, his ownership, 4 million now. His ownership's on the rise. However, I don't think he's going to keep his place in his team for that long at all. I think it'll be a couple of game weeks max. So I probably won't end up having him on in the team, just because he's guaranteed to be the first 3.8 million defender, and everyone will be looking at him when another injury crops up. So I'm gonna steer a little bit away potentially from Lascelles and maybe bring in like a Charlie Taylor or something like that. But yeah, that's the current wildcard team at the moment. Josh, thoughts on that? There's a couple of players in there that I'm looking to change around. Would you sort of be thinking in that same mindset?
Yeah, 100% when it comes to Lascelles. He's one of those players who's an instant sell as soon as Botman is fit, which is hopefully pretty soon for Newcastle's sake. So yeah, for me, I think Charlie Taylor at 3.9 is probably one of your best bets. Around that price, there's not too many other options. I won't go near Kabul. His minutes are not really assured at the moment. I think there's Maguire at 4.2 if you really want to go out there for that United defence after that Man City game. But like I said, there's a lackluster of options in that defence. I think Palmer is the smart choice at that price point, 4.9 million on penalties. Yes, the fixtures aren't great, but if you want someone to come in, if you've got an injury or a suspension or something like that, I think he's a good option to have off the bench. And then, yeah, Ollie Watkins as well. Like you say, I think he's definitely essential right now. Someone who I can't really move to, given the fact that I've got Alvarez. And I think for me, I said it before last week as well, I think Alvarez's fixtures over the next two now are just as good as those Watkins fixtures, given the Manchester City attack. So it's just a case of whether he outscores Watkins or not. But yeah, it's really tough. And I think there's a good argument to have Alvarez, Watkins and Haaland in some drafts. So if some teams, or if you're wildcarding this week and you're looking at that, I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea either. So that wraps up our game week 10 team selection videos. Let us know what you think about Ben's wildcard in the comments. What changes would you make to it? Has he made some mistakes maybe? I don't know. Let's hear what you say in the comments. What transfers would you make for my team as well? Would you do that hit that I said, that -4 with Bruno out, or would you play it safe and just do that defensive switch?
And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And as usual, I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
later. Have a good game week, everyone.